Hello and welcome to The Nation This Week. You're joining me, Elane, Noor, Abdullah, coming to you live from Wisma Bernama, right here in the capital city of Kuala Lumpur. It is Friday, the day we do a wrap of all the stories that have been making headlines this week. So, The Nation This Week, we have three panel guests joining us. NORDIN Abdullah, Crisis Management Analyst; FARIDAH, HAMEED, Leadership Coach; DR.AT, KUMARARAJAH, Treasurer General of NCCIM. We begin this week with big topics that have been raised. Undi 18, of course, the big topic. According to the Election Commission's Deputy Chairman, the Johor election is set to be the first to have voters aged 18 to 20 following the successful implementation of Undi 18. Now, about 6% of the 2.5 million Johor voters will be from the Undi 18 segment. And for the first time in the history of the country, teenagers will head to the ballot box in an election as those aged 18 to 20 join the electorate. So this is big news. And of course, we'll also be touching on the RFID. The government has instructed Plus, Malaysia, Berhad and Touch and Go to justify this 35 ringgit for RFID stickers. According to the Works Minister, 2 companies have been asked for an explanation on pricing. And also, we'd like to touch a little bit on the Malaysian Employees Federation backing the government's move to stop any more withdrawals from EPF. So later, I'd like to get the panel's take on this, yay or nay, or why. And apparently, it's not a popular move. 48% of EPF members aged below 55 now have critical levels of low savings. And from the Health Minister's desk, of course, we'll be talking about Omicron. The wave has begun and a number of COVID-19 cases are on the rise. I strongly believe that the situation will be under control due to our high vaccination rates. And we will also cover a little bit of the international two topics making headlines, climate change as well as Ukraine. So before I go into that, perhaps we'll just touch a little bit on the stories that I've just mentioned. Anyone has any comments? Let's talk about Undi 18. Let's start with you, Noordin.
Well, I'm excited about Undi 18 actually, and it's something that when we talk about what's happened in the country over the last 5 years, it's really something different. You know, it's something that, you know, you can talk about this policy and that policy, but this is an earth-moving moment in terms of getting Malaysia up to speed with most of the developed world now. So, you know, it's kind of an exciting time, and I'm excited to see how it goes for Johor.
Exactly. DR.AT, I think you have some comments on this as well. Let's hear your thoughts.
But that's also like what Noordin said, right? So it's watershed moment. And it's also good to see like a bipartisan approach. So this Undi 18 started 2 governments ago, if you remember. So like we have already come to the 3rd generation. But that 3rd generation government, after the first round, has also kept to the promises. The states have made the changes. And if you really look at the numbers, I think you mentioned just now that 6%. So this new 176,000 new voters in the additional 700,000 that is going to go to the polls in the 56 seats in Johor will probably tilt the favor in terms of the anti-incumbent, and that's probably the reason why many are really vouching for it. But I think some interesting points have come out from there. You know, I read something very interesting. I think one of the MPs have actually asked for a polling station to be set up in Singapore because we have got 400,000 Malaysians who are working there and probably may not want to cross. Especially with the VTL and everything else in place, that's really going to see how the balance favors. And I think it's a national dress rehearsal. If Johor goes right, we are probably heading into a general election sooner than later.
Any thoughts, Farida?
Yes, I want to jump in because I'm guarded about how this is going to pan out. Because all the research that has been done shows that about 70% of young people are apathetic about the state of the political situation in the country. And all the studies that have been done show that they bear that out. And so while I'm excited about the fact that now 18 is the new 21, because I could only vote when I turned 21, I'm guarded about the results because what we're going to have to see is how many of them actually show up. Because the data seems to show they don't really care. They feel the politicians don't care about them at all. And I think after GE14, what happened, and the people that were voted in the end were not in government. I think there's a lot of apathy, and rightly so. So my feel is I'm going to be very guarded about whether we're going to see them turn up in actual big numbers.
Dato, I think you wanted to say something. I saw you raising.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the issue everywhere, right? But if you really look at the national numbers, there's only 1.2 million additional voters going into our new polls, which is about 21 million people. So this 5% of this group, largely like what Faridah mentioned, it probably would not turn up at the polling stations, which means their impact to the national number, while probably very crucial in marginal seats, urban seats, but in the rural areas, you may not have that kind of tilt that's going to happen, unless there's a huge tilt, which happened in 2018 with the Malay voters shifting. Otherwise, everything else is more or less set in motion. It is basically now the Malay votes that will determine the GE15 outcomes. Undi 18, nice to speak about, may not be high impact.
But
what I'm thinking here is, what I'm thinking here is if this is a par 5. This is not we're not going to get a hole in one around Undi 18. It will take a while for these people. Maybe even some people don't even believe it's really happening. So. Yeah. Once their friends talk about it, and they'll say, "Oh, did you vote? Oh, I didn't vote. Maybe you should have voted." And this kind of thinking will start the removal of any kind of political atrophy where in that younger group who are kind of being disillusioned. Now you need to kind of get out of your house and go and vote and be part of it, not just be a keyboard warrior or complain a lot. Go and make your voice heard at the ballot box.
So it will be interesting to see, because Johor, like as mentioned earlier, will be sort of like the initial test bid, and we'll see the results from that. And as you mentioned as well, Datuk, that this would likely trigger a potentially earlier general election. Now, let's quickly move on to the RFID. We talked about this the last time, the fiasco of the sort of backlog at tolls. And here there's another issue with regards to the cost and the price of 35 ringgit for RFID stickers. Anybody have any comments on this?
See, Elane, primarily I think RFID is the right direction to move forward to, but the problem is maybe it just comes in implementation. I think again squares down to the fact that communication has been sorely lacking. I think the silence is deafening in that way. Because if Plus, whoever the guys who are implementing it, the touch and go boys, if they had actually communicated pretty well, placed a lot of their support staffs at the junctions, physically present. I myself have passed twice, and I really don't use RFID, though my wife has tried this, and in her car works, in my car doesn't work. So my problem is I don't want to do it.
Exactly.
I'm not ready for change. It's just that the technical support must be present on site. If not,
because we're talking about digitalization, so it must be a smooth transition in order for us to be able to use this service. I want to also quickly highlight that there's also talk about no more monopoly of touch and go on highways, because the government will soon allow public to pay for these highway tolls using any digital payment provider. Any thoughts on this? I think this is a great move, though.
I think this is where MyCC picked up AT. This is where MyCC picked up the game and said, look, well, we need to look into this and keep an eye on it. So I'm pleased to see MyCC playing their role around this issue to ensure that there's no unfair competition. And if you're removing monopolies, removing cartels, removing any kind of potential for unfair competition, and this is really the first step. Again, we've got to move to this digitalized economy. We've got to move quickly, and just highways is just one piece of the puzzle.
We actually moved. The thing is, right, so what these guys haven't communicated to us is RFID is just on the way to multi-lane free flow, the MLFF system, which is the gantry-less systems that we are looking at. And they're apparently already doing this in Lekas as a pilot project and soon to be established in Besraya. But none of this, actually all these are small prints in any articles you read. Nobody has really communicated. People will have buy-in. The problem is we don't want to buy in from them. We just say, look, I'm going to go do this and we're doing it, and then you screw it up. And that's really not the way to do this.
Now, we'll come back to some of these topics later, but I want to cover the topics that you guys would like to raise. So, Datuk.AT, let's go with some of the issues that you'd like to highlight for this week. Over to you.
Okay, so if I mean, really bringing back the one thing that came out, I think, early part of the week was the fact that, we have dropped 5 places in the corruption index, the CPI, which TI actually put up. And I think 2 years consecutively we have dropped, and now we're at 62 ranking out of 180 countries, and we're at 48 points. Now, this probably would have been worse if not for things like Undi 18, if not for some of those structural reforms which has been started in Parliament. Just hearing news today morning, I think in the second quarter, there's going to be a paper going to be presented to Cabinet looking at some of the parliamentary reforms that we want. But actually speaking, I would profess, right? So I think unfair comparisons have been made to Singapore and saying, look, Singapore is at the 50th position, they are at 85 out of 100 points, and they are doing very, very well. That's like comparing Proton to Porsche. Not fair. But actually, I mean, I've looked at it, and if you look at the numbers, if you look at our neighbors, you look at Indonesia, they're not very far behind us. They're actually at what? Position number 96, which only 38 points. We look at Cambodia, Thailand, they're all far behind us. So actually, to compare us to Singapore, while it is aspirational, may not be right, because we as a nation are not there yet. But we are in the right direction. I think some of it could be done a lot more better. But with all the government transition in place, I think holding this position itself was already a big achievement. To my logic is that.
Faridah, your thoughts?
One of the things I wanted to let Farida talk first. Yeah, go for it.
Yeah,
Ladies first.
I was reading up about this, and it kind of blew my mind when I read that apparently even the recommendations from 2015 from the from MACC have not even been, there's been no progress on it. So something that happened even like 2015, so that's what, 7 years ago, no action has been taken. So every year we come up with this TI index and we are always not performing very well. And nothing seems to change, because even with the AG's report, every year we see, there's all these complaints by the AG. No changes is made, or at least there's nothing communicated to the public to say, listen, we had this last year, we have taken all these steps to rectify this problem. And so to me, it feels like, yes, we see this TI index, we never expect Malaysia to do really well. But I do agree with AT that, it's apples and oranges to compare us to Singapore, because it's a different environment. But I mean, I think the reality is on the ground. If you talk to your friends at the mamak shop, the reality is there any political will or not? Right? Is anything going to change?
Right. So that same friends at the mamak shop, that's the problem, right? So we have the same friends at the mamak shop, the guys who complain about AES. Now, again, we are the ones who don't want AES simply because they're automated, while the way the procurement was done is debatable. But the whole idea of AES is we will get caught without human intervention, but that's not really what we want. So as Malaysians, I don't even think that the nation is ready for that kind of transformation. Why not we make this comparison to Vietnam? We still say a lot of investments going towards Vietnam, a lot of investments going towards Indonesia, and they're growing at 2 times our speed. So why not we make and say, look, those guys are 50 points behind us in terms of the CPI. So they are really pretty doing well. So sometimes I think we are, you'll have to look at institutional reforms, see where as a nation we are, and then probably make those changes. And probably you have a good fit.
This is where AT, I wanted to put it into the mix. A generation ago in Asia, two of the most corrupt places in probably on the planet, but in Asia were Singapore and Hong Kong. So it takes a generation to fix some of these problems. The other thing I think we've got to look at is this is a corruption perception index. And Farida mentioned earlier, the communications is not there. Now, it's not just communications coming out of MACC. They're just one part of a huge machinery dealing with corruption. They're just that enforcement level. But what about all the organizations? What about all the government departments who have done things to improve their purchasing process, who have done things to improve the tender process? When this is communicated, and this is communicated to the global media, not just here in Malaysia. Of course, these guys do look at what's going on here, and they all have Google. But the reality is you've got to put this on a global scale. You've got to push it out into the international media and show the proof of the pudding. And I think that's the challenging part for especially government departments who are not necessarily geared up as great communicators, because they've got other more important things to do.
So that's the thing, right? So who's carrying this KPI? Somebody must be, deputed to say, look, you carry this KPI in the next 5 years. I want X number of points, and I want dropping to this number of levels. Because if you really see how that CPI is composed, it comes from 13 independent parameters. So it is not only MACC, like you said, right? So it's parliament, it's reforms, it's institutions, it's everything else. So why not everybody starts, but somebody carry the KPI? I'm not really sure who's carrying the KPI, but somebody is reporting it. That's the problem.
So I'd like to now move on to Faridah's topic as we are halfway through the show. Faridah, perhaps you can tell us what's on your mind this week.
Okay, so this week I was very taken up with the story of Ruhana Abdullah. I think everybody has read some version of it, the 22-year-old Malay Muslim girl who was brought up by a Chinese kindergarten teacher. She's been struggling to get her Malaysian nationality because her father was Malaysian and mother, I believe, was Indonesian. Father has absconded. She has no idea where he is. The story is that the mother has disappeared into Indonesia. And she has struggled to put in all the applications. From what the news reports say, she submitted the last application, I think, in 2016, and has not had any kind of feedback or contact. So even if you remove the time of the pandemic, which is 2020, 2021, let's say we remove 2.5 years, that was still 3 years from the time she submitted her documents where there was zero communication with her. So the question becomes now is what happened to that? Because this is not the first time we're hearing a story like that. But the other point I want to make is because there's a structural issue there, but I think there's also a humane issue here. Because when you talk about all these stateless children, I think the last statistic came out in 2016. Home Ministry said there's almost 300,000 stateless children in the country. And so this clearly is a big issue because what happens to these children is they have no access to healthcare, to education, and a whole host of other services that we as Malaysian citizens who are recognized as Malaysian citizens have access to. So I think I don't know the solution to this, but I believe there has to be, just like what AT was saying just now about like who is taking care of the KPI about corruption. Perhaps there needs to be a unit for the stateless children that is actually looking into this matter. Because yes, they're talking about revising the laws and all of that, but most of these people have to go to court to get their identity or their citizenship as Malaysian. And these are people who often don't have a lot of money. Like this girl was saying, she's been suicidal. She's been struggling to go to school, to get into university, and she avoids authorities all the time. So what is actually happening, we don't know, because all we know is the Minister of Home Affairs said, yes, he's going to look into it, and he wants to see the documents of the father, because the father is apparently a Malaysian. But where is he? Nobody knows where he is. So if they cannot find him, what's going to happen to this girl? So I throw it out to the panelists because, I don't know what is the solution to this, but it has to be handled because there's about 300,000 young people that are struggling with this.
If somebody can bring her case right up to the Prime Minister, it usually gets solved. Because what I really cannot understand in our country is, why must the Prime Minister intervene in every small case, right? So I saw this optics yesterday and I read it in online, and it says the Prime Minister met 2 of our badminton heroes and it says, I've met them and it is solved. And I actually thought he only met them alone, but then he met them with the whole BAM behind them. The thing is, why couldn't BAM solve it? Why must bring it up right to the top? So that's my logic is, like you said just now, right? The institutions have actually failed to deliver this on that scale. All this ad hoc, I will look into it, is like, fine, but would you be able to solve everybody's problem if you solve this child's problem? So it really doesn't work that way. As a nation, we must make a decision and say, look, we want to become developed by 2030, and these are the things that we must put in place, and these are things that needed to be put in place. That's not something.
I think that nails it on the head. And the institutions are there for a reason. It's meant to do its function. It does not need to have intervention in order for it to be able to proceed as it should. Now, before we run out of time, I also want to talk about your topic, Nordin. You want to talk about road safety. We're coming up on Chinese New Year. Next week will be a heavy week for travels. You have road safety in mind. Let's hear about what are your concerns, Nordin.
Okay, before I get to that, I really just got to go back to what AT and Faridah just said. Actually, when I hear 300,000 people, there are countries around the world who don't have a population of 300,000. And a population chunk of people, young people like that, these are a strategic resource for the future. We're actually looking down the barrel of a demographic problem of going into Malaysia being an aging population. So actually, those 300,000 people are a strategic resource for the country that need to be considered as such. And when you start with that in mind, you're going to come up with a different solution. But going to your question, Elane, and I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about this, is kind of My concern, is road safety around Chinese New Year, Hari Raya, Deepavali. You choose the festival, and you will see a spike in road deaths. I know the minister, Dr. Sri Wikashong, has put out some statements recently stopping heavy vehicles in either side of Chinese New Year, and there's a bit of communications going on from that minister and that ministry to ensure that is in place. But actually, it comes down to individuals making better decisions. And I think this is my concern for everyone. We do so much around SOPs for saving ourselves from COVID-19. Can we do the SOPs of not going over 110 kilometers an hour, or do the SOP of wearing a seatbelt, or guys, this is more dangerous. I can tell you, driving 100 kilometers an hour is more dangerous than COVID-19.
The SOP of being fresh enough to travel, and because you will get really tired easily, especially I'm dreading my travels. I'm going back home, and I'm just wondering, like, what is the best time for me to do this? And everybody tries to beat that traffic by traveling at a ridiculous hour, perhaps like at 3 a.m., 4 a.m., 5 a.m., hoping to beat that 6-hour jam by doing it in the normal 2 hours. But it also means that you're sacrificing things along the way, and having a buddy system or something like that will probably help. Like you said, those SOPs that needs to be put in place.
Think of the Ramadan buffet. Everyone goes for Ramadan buffet, right? They all rush to get there at a certain time. The moment you go after everyone has rushed, you have to wait. You're still a little bit hungry for another 5 minutes. But think along those lines. Think on off-peak. This idea of off-peak travel and off-peak behavior.
Yeah, I think you were talking about road safety and road conditions as well. Any thoughts, AT, as well as Faridah, on this?
No.
Yeah, I'm just glad because I can see the traffic is very light today. I was out this morning.
Actually,
so I was really glad. Yeah, so the traffic has become lighter, but I expect over the weekend, all the highways are going to be pretty jam-packed.
It's just that it should be incentivized also, like Noordin said, right? So it should be incentivized for people to move out early. And I think most private sector guys will probably understand that people are going to travel, and they will actually make different changes to their work schedule to allow this travel to happen. It is just that nobody has really taken it upon time to do it. The minister's announcement is welcome, but I think it's a bit too late. And anyway, there's nothing new in it. People boarding, people checking on what's going to happen in terms of traffic. Yeah, it's really no game changer I see. And I really thought something new would have happened in the post-pandemic world. But it's business as usual. Before I forget, must wish everyone happy Water Tiger Chinese New Year.
Exactly. So hopefully, as we're moving into the week where I think from today onwards, right up to the entire week, people will be planning their travels back to the hometown to travel safe in order for them to be able to get home to actually spend time with their family. I think those are the things that people need to think about when they're traveling versus like, I just want to get there. I'm so tired. You have so many things that distract you from the main purpose of being able to arrive safely at wherever your destination is. But we have a couple of more minutes to go. So I would like to at least bring up one of the earlier topics that I raised, which is a local topic of talking about EPF. I wanted to get your take individually, whether yay or nay in terms of the MEF backing the government's move to stop any more EPF withdrawals. Let's start with you, Noordin.
It was a good idea when they did it. It's done, but if there's nothing left in the kitty after you're 55, you've got a huge crisis on your hands. And I think, we don't want to see old homeless people because they don't have the money to pay their bills. So let's think of other solutions, other short-term solutions for short-term problems, and long-term solutions for long-term demographic shifts.
AT, any thoughts?
There's a huge mismatch, right? I think what MEF has done really nailed it again. I think supports the government's argument about you should not mismatch the short-term needs to withdraw immediate money and long-term savings, because we already put 6 million people below the $10,000 savings in EPF. If they allow this round, that will add on another million. So we'll have 7 million out of our 15 million EPF depositors with less than 10,000 in their savings. It really doesn't make sense because it's already drained 101 billion out of the EPF contributions. So I think we have done enough with EPF. Let's leave it alone and let's look at short-term fiscal injection, changes in business environment, better job opportunities using other measures, and not go back to long-term saving. It's really a good thing as far as what MEF has done. Dr. Said, if I'm not mistaken.
Farida?
Yeah, my take is if you look at the big picture, 55-year-old, you want to withdraw your money, if I'm not mistaken, was created a long time ago and people lived a lot shorter. Now people are living a lot longer. So I think if you step back and you look at the big picture, I think this whole thing needs an overhaul anyway, because people are living longer. And, COVID destroyed many people's lives because so many thousands and millions lost their jobs. So I don't know the answer to this because I think it's a chicken and egg situation. I know people who lost their jobs, husband and wife, both no income, and the EPF was a godsend. But I do understand that if even that little bit you don't have in your old age is not going to be helpful. But what can you do with 10,000 anyway when you're 70, 80 years old? So, if you look at it from that perspective, so I do think the government needs to overhaul the system, and they do need to come up with some kind of a real policy, a strong policy that looks at this in the long term so that those who are aged will not end up being homeless and still have access to healthcare, which is the most important thing when you're old. But I think this whole thing needs an overhaul.
Thank you so much, Farida, AT, Nordin. We are in our last minute. Anybody wants to make any special announcements, any special wishes as we're coming out on Chinese New Year, please feel free to be able to. AT, perhaps we'll start the closing with your final message today.
Like I said, let's have a very good Chinese New Year as we come back after nearly a 10 days break. And I'm sure we're probably ready to go. As far as the economy is concerned, it's really picking up. I think we have also tweaked some of those things that government needs to tweak in terms of foreign labor, in terms of investment drives. Things the numbers are looking really positive. And as a Malaysian, and I think really want to wish everybody a happy Chinese New Year and come back pretty good.
Farida, let's go with you for your message.
Kamli Fachai, everyone, to my family, friends, and everybody else who's watching. I just hope that the year of the water tiger brings a new dawn for all of us and that we will see the end of all these COVID problems that we've been having. That is my hope for all of us.
And Nordin, let's close with you.
Hong Si Fai Chai and Xin Yin Kuai Le, and everyone, go out and find some good Chinese food and some good Chinese friends and enjoy it together, and find an excuse to meet friends that you haven't seen in a long time, but do it responsibly.
Yes, do it responsibly. Thank you so much, everyone. Datuk.AT, KUMARARAJAH, of course, as well as Noordin Abdullah and FARIDAH Hameed joining us today on The Nation This Week. Thanks for staying with me till the end of the session. I would like to take this opportunity as well to be able to wish anyone that's traveling home right now, travel safe. Think of your family and loved ones. Please arrive safely at destination. Take care of each other. Continue to practice SOPs in this current situation and continue to stay safe. Bye for now. I'm Elane. This has been The Nation This Week.